example, a what if in my day-to-day operations would be, what if a papa pot ceases to operate because the roads are cut off or something? And then we say, okay, we could use on a pot in Port Harcourt. You can have the solution on paper, but then if you don't test it from time to time, and you wait until calamity befronts you, then it becomes a problem because you don't have the relationships, you don't understand how it works. So it's very important to stress test some of these initiatives or to pilot them depending on what the area of focus is. The other one I will talk about is visibility, driving visibility in operations, and I think this is very important. As someone with an operational background, we in operations tend to shy away from visibility because the way we operate is sort of like a black box. We do whatever it is that we do, but people are interested in the output. So for example, in the FMCG industry, for those in supply chain, the rest of the business just expects the product, at the right cost, at the right quality. What happens in between, the transformation process from ordering the materials to converting it to finished goods and to making it available, distributing to the customers, it tends to be, assumed as what should happen normally. And the only time people get interested is when something has totally gone wrong. Now, in terms of visibility, what it does is it helps build a lot more synergy across the business, where you are giving some level of indication into the entire chain across the business. And then other members of the organization can take calculated risk or calculated decisions based on what they know, whether or not the risk, eventually materializes. But maybe I'll stress on that a bit later.
Thank you for.
I have just one more. Yeah. So I think the other one I would stress on is, especially for leaders in the organization, is what I would call data-driven decision making. I firmly believe that the recipe today in volatile situations is you mix that with your experience and gut feel. You add the data-driven decision making on top of that. And what it does is it helps drive a lot more sharp insights, real-time decisions, and helps you ensure that you're taking the right steps per time. Very quick example on that is in terms of, again, the port. What we did was we got some sort of simple data analytical tool. We dumped all our information on there. And then we realized that using different port terminals, because within Apapa there are about 4 port terminals, specific shipping lines for a specific port terminal, for shipments coming from a specific country, you begin to see some trends. And what we simply did was we dumped the data into the tool. It gave us the results. And then we sort of revisited the algorithm in terms of what we ship to what port. And in that instance, we were able to bring our clearing lead times to about 1.5 weeks. We're able to reduce our demurrage by about 80%, simply by leveraging on data, as opposed to relying on old age experience and what we think we know. So I think I just wanted to stress that. The last one is also probably something important for leaders, which is to be very connected with what is happening on the shop floor. By shop floor now, whether it's product or service based, is to really understand what is happening with our teams. The iceberg of ignorance talks about top management only knowing about 4% of the real frontline problems in an organization. And therefore, if we are not careful, we bring about solutions for what we think are the problems, and it doesn't really move the needle. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Real insights there, and we'll delve into them a bit more later. Can we, Tokumbo, if you're ready for us now, we are very keen to hear what you have to say from the private equity perspective, to give us your view.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. And thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to give my perspective here. Just to set the context, I'm sure everybody knows what's driving our volatility, but I'm thinking about it from 3 main areas. which is conflict in Ukraine, Russia, particularly impact on our currency, and the China factor, which looms large in many ways. Conflict is obviously driving up prices of raw materials or prices of imports. Our currency is in, I won't call it a free fall, but it's broaching some new levels that we all didn't expect, perhaps in such a short time. And of course, with the China factor, that is anything ranging from the price of raw materials, price of imports, impact on labor, local investments that are not necessarily creating jobs locally here on our own continent. So, and all of those, so just to set the context, all of those are not just driving up inflation, but what we're also seeing is with those 3 C's, I call them, we have a dearth of financing in our local environment. So many of our local companies I've seen that finance has dried up. So it's difficult to raise, whether that's debt or equity for your business. And then also what we're seeing is that there's a death.
Just a minute, we've lost you. We've lost the audio. Just a minute, sorry. What happened?
At which point did you lose me?
Apologies, they're sorting it out.
And we can hear them.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can't hear you yet. We can't hear you yet, sorry. I'll let you know as soon as it's back.
Okay.
We can hear you online.
I know. I'm wondering if we should just have our own session online.
Okay. Can you make it a bit louder now? Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
You got to the part you were saying something about capital drying up.
Yes.
That was the last thing I heard.
Just to repeat. So the impact of the first aspect of what I spoke about through the 3 C's is there's a dearth of capital. So it's difficult to raise financing for your businesses. Or businesses in general, but also even when you can raise financing, the cost of that financing has gone up because obviously the interest rates have gone up globally, and our base interest rate, which is usually priced off the dollar, has gone up considerably. So if you're thinking why the cost of your financing locally is going up, there's a whole tsunami of events that have led to that. In addition to the fact that there's less money available. And so the money that is also available, there's a drive to quality. So what does that mean? They're looking for people like us who are making investments, or even banks are looking for better run companies, companies with greater opportunity, that are more attractive, and actually that are run by people that understand how to operate in such a volatile environment. And part of being able to operate in such a volatile environment is your ability to be flexible and pivot as a team. So what does that mean for you? As companies or anybody that's raising money, you need to lengthen what we call the runway for your reserves. How much longer can you make your money last? How much longer can you operate with any money that you've raised such that you can delay the time that you need to go back into the market? And also, how can you make your company more attractive for funders who actually are ready to write checks? Tolu mentioned a couple of things, but before I go into aspects around revenue, new products, new markets, one of the key things is people. You as the leader and your team. What you need, what we find at times like this is when things are going well, it's difficult to know that everybody is not rowing in the same direction, because markets are good, are buoyant, and just due to the fact that, a good tide raises all boats, you may continue to grow. In volatile times like this is when it becomes really crucial to make sure that you have people who are fit for purpose. You have the right people in the right seats, people that are hungry and are willing to be self-starters. It's very key at this point to ensure that everybody is on the same page with respect to what it is your company or your business is even trying to achieve. It's very easy to assume that everybody understands, and if I can give you a picture that everybody understands what the company is trying to achieve. If I can give you a picture, if you consider rowers on a lake who are in a race, and if you imagine that the first half of the boat, of the rowers, are trying to row forward, and the second half are moving their oars to row backwards, the boat's not going anywhere. And what you find at times like this is, if you bring 5 of your people into the room to say, okay, what is it that we need to do now? What's our vision? What are we trying to do? You may get 5 interpretations. So before you even begin to think about new products, new markets, you need to get everybody rowing in the same direction. This is also a good time in terms of process. How do you make your processes efficient? How do you, we call it the word is the corporate operating system, but actually now it needs to be the entrepreneurial operating system. How can we be nimble? How can we make sure that we have those processes and procedures that enable everybody to achieve the best at a time like this? It's no point beginning to strategize about which new product should we be making, which new market should we be going, if internally you're sloppy and you can't even adapt to that new strategy. So if there's one thing you take away from today, I'll talk about some of the harder things. On the soft side, you need everybody on the same page. You need everybody needs to understand where the company is trying to go, and everybody needs to be willing to row in that same direction. Now, coming to other aspects that will make your company more attractive and also help you to lengthen your runway. On the revenue side, this is a time to be innovative. What are the new product extensions that we can bring in at a lower cost to maybe what we've been producing our products in the past? How can we have product extensions to broaden our market? And here particularly, how can we be more export focused? When we talk about neutralizing the impact of the currency devaluation, what can we do to lower our cost of raw materials, but also what can we do to begin to think about how we can be more export-driven focused and
Tokumbo, if I'm sorry to interrupt you, if you could hold the thought. You are developing that very nicely. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to perhaps hold that thought. When we come round again, we will be able to continue with it. You made a lot of valuable points there, and I just wanted to get Karen's perspective, if you don't mind.
Can I just make the last point on cost efficiency, if you don't mind?
Okay.
Because it's very important that as you're thinking about the revenue and we're thinking about cost efficiency, like I mentioned earlier, raw material substitution, and I'll talk on that a bit more, digital transformation for efficiency, and how you can leverage the whole drive on climate action for efficiency as well. So I'll leave that for now. And,
we're getting some interference
on the line. Yeah, so I'll stop there for now. And
thank you, Tokumbo, and we'll come back to it. What's that interference? Please, if you're not one of our panelists, could you mute yourself, please? Please. Thank you. Karen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Well, it's an honor, even more than worth getting up in the wee hours of the morning. Uh, Mexico and Nigeria, I think, have a lot of similarities. By definition, we live in countries that require agility and resilience and the ability to deal with shocks, both external and internal, in a creative way, just to survive, much less prosper. As a board member, we're responsible for setting strategy, and many of the things that my esteemed speakers beforehand mentioned are things that I think are important. I'm on the board of 3 financial institutions, 2 in the Dominican Republic, 1 in Mexico. I was on the board of an industrial company for 6 years, and I'm on the board of a major hospital. Very different industries, having to deal with our economic shocks, our political shocks, the pandemic, and what did I take away from all of these different experiences? One of them is you need to look for opportunities. You have your, what I call your survival processes, which is cost efficiency. It's how do I keep the factory open in the middle of a pandemic? How do I get my product designated as a critical product? How do I run a hospital when I have half my hospital dedicated to COVID, which from a hospital point of view is not a money-making opportunity, but it's something that we must do because that is what we're here for. All of these, and then as a bank, how do I deal with the branches being closed, my employees being at home, and how do I set up essentially an alternate financial system in a matter of months? What all 3 of these different industries taught me was you can't plan for 5 years. You can't plan for 2 years. What you can do is my best way forward now for the next year, maybe, is this. And for instance, in the hospital, we had rolling budgets. So we would, and we're still doing this because there's a lot of uncertainty in Mexico too, where we do a 3-year plan, a 1-year more concrete budget, and every 90 days we look at how the budget's going, what the results are, what the impacts were that we didn't foresee, the foreign exchange rate, the government saying they don't want private sector health care, whatever those shocks are. That allows us to have a direction, but we also are able to correct on course as things happen. You can't operate without a budget. You have to have a plan and you have to have a strategy. But the olden days of give me a 5-year plan, I just always, right now I think that's a joke. And I've been through a lot of crises, and every time some banker says, I want your 5-year plan, and I was a banker, I laugh. So I'm fine, I'll give you the latest fantasy. What I can't, and so what the board has to do is support support management in this journey of constant adaptation, of constantly looking for new ways to do things. In the Bank of the Dominican Republic, we were halfway through a digital transformation, and the board said, well, we're having employees at home, the branches are closed, we better get this digital transformation done fast and accelerate. So, that was our adaptation as a board to say, let's go for it. It's an opportunity. We're going to get these people to quit going to the branches. So when the pandemic is over, they have an alternative. And so we're doing very well. We took an opportunity which was forced on us. And instead of moaning and groaning, we said, we'll go for it. So there are a lot of different pieces to this. My 5 minutes is up. Industrial companies have something different, and I have to say that hospitals are the most complex thing I've ever seen in my life. And we're clawing our way back out of the pandemic, even as we speak. So that's the Mexican way of doing things.
Thank you very much, Karen. And so I'd like to engage with the panel now, and starting with Toby. When you were talking, you were saying something about foreign exchange neutrality, and you told us what it was about. So my question to you in the Nigerian context is, what do you think has stopped us or stopped most of our companies from achieving that now, or at least having progressed further towards it than they are now?
Thank you. So I think, first of all, is a lot of companies within the country have, like I said earlier, probably treated some of these issues as outlier events. So the first major Forex challenge was sometime 2016, 2017. And I can guarantee that almost every company probably had a plan on what to do, how to protect stocks from the Forex situation. But then the moment the Forex issues sort of eased up a bit, I'm sure a lot of companies went back into business as usual. I think, the way I would see it is, in practical terms, we also have to be creative. And I think a lot of what has been said today is around spotting the opportunities. If I refer to multinationals, for example, whether you are in financial services or in production, what we see is, for most multinationals, they're gravitating towards sort of integrated operations where you have hubs. You have hubs maybe for HR services or for tech or for other things. Again, for some of these companies represented in Nigeria, it's probably the right time to start thinking of how to pitch yourself to become a sort of hub. So imagine if you work for a multinational and then you become the HR services hub for Middle East, Africa, Europe. What that does is, in a way, you start earning some Forex for those services rendered. These are just sort of creative ways to go about it. I think also for, would I say, financial services or PFAs, again, it's probably around how do we tap into, especially, I would say, maybe the Gen X or the boomers who would be retiring in the next 10, 15 years, which is now trying to improve a bit more of the FDI. And it could be something, maybe a collaboration with NHS, because again, most people abroad are thinking of, do I come back to Nigeria, get a house? And it could be for £300 a month, we would collaborate with NHF. You can get a 3-bedroom bungalow in Lekki Free Trade Zone, something along those lines, But the point is, I don't think there is a silver bullet. It's really about the creativity on trying to ensure that you treat something like Forex as, it's a case of when do I get the neutrality, not if. Backward integration, obviously, without saying, has to happen. But the key thing is not to mistake backward integration for de-dollarization. Because, again, if you are doing backward integration, but everything you're doing is with suppliers locally that who import almost everything else, then you haven't really protected yourself from the Forex shortages. And I say this because it comes with a lot more investment. a lot more long-term thinking. But that is the only way you tend to protect yourself in the long run from the shocks from Forex.
Thank you for that answer. I was amused when you said the first time round was 2016, and I thought, well, Toby must be even younger than I thought he was, because those of us who have been around have seen a lot more shocks in the Forex in Nigeria than that.
Yeah.
A lot more so. And I think
in my short career.
2016 was just the last time around, but believe me, we've been on this rodeo for several. It's been happening over and over again. But thank you very much for that. Tokumbo, I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about the issues for you, especially in private equity and all of that, what sense, there's this sense about private equity investors being very, very hard-nosed, and the numbers are the numbers, and they don't want to know. What do you do as a private equity investor to the companies that you're invested in, to let them understand that at a time like this and these volatile times, where they have the flexibility, so to speak, how do you communicate that to them?
First of all, as a private equity investor, we are partners to the business. So we can't just be about the numbers. Yeah. And my firm in particular is very deliberate and intentional about impact beyond the numbers. So whether that's even within the firm, the employee welfare, better employee empowerment, better environment for working, whether that's driving for financial inclusion or what have you. So what do we bring? As private equity investors, we are not just bringing money. We're bringing access to a talent network. Oftentimes, sometimes we have our own staff actually go and plug resource gaps within the company. So at times we've had to stand in as the de facto CFO to provide CFO skills, even human resources, tapping our network from even our investors and bringing that support. So when we talk about, having the adaptability and flexibility, we are sitting around the table, sometimes almost as executives, alongside the team to provide that strategic thinking, to provide that thinking around new products, new markets, cost efficiencies, and bring in additional funding to drive some of that digital transformation or even energy transition. So we roll up our sleeves and we're partnering. We're not just about the numbers. We're bringing the resources and we're bringing the additional thinking. And where possible, we bring in technocrats and technical expertise, even from international manufacturing companies, if that's required, or bring in emergency funding. So we're not just about the numbers.
So it's good to hear that. As I say, a lot of the impression with a lot of people is that private equity investors can be very tough to deal with at the best of times, but I guess it does make sense, as you say, that if they want the company to succeed, really, which is everybody's ultimate aim, it should work just as you've said. Karen, coming to you, I really liked what you were saying, and I think it resonated in the room when you said, a 5-year plan, what is that? But I'll give you what is on the table. And for us here in Nigeria, I guess, I don't want to say it's always been volatile, but I think 5-year plans, we've always felt that they were quite difficult, and we felt that if you could do 3, you were doing quite well. But, when you were talking about this question of having, in spite of the difficulties, still having to have a budget, you're right, it is, you've still got to work against something, but reviewing it every 90 days, how realistic is this when it's done? Is it something about, sometimes boards say they're doing this, but you find they're going through the motions, and that in a sense they're still holding the team, the management team, to whatever was set for the 1 year for the budget. So they claim that they're reviewing it every 90 days, but is it a reality? I think that's what I wanted to ask.
Well, what we basically do is we do hold people, the management team, to the budget. However, we have all sorts of shocks here. I mean, we have the major railroad in the country shut down because there's so many migrants piling on top of it to get to the United States that it can't run. So that impacts the entire supply chain. If we have a major FX issue, because Mexico has a super peso right now, and we don't know how long that's going to last, with a massive election coming up, which is causing volatility. If we see a shock like a change in the FX rate or lack of ability to get supplies because the trains aren't running, then we can adjust the budget. It gives us the ability to say, okay, the hospital imports, most of our medical supplies are imported in dollars. We tend to be hedged, but we didn't expect to have a super peso. And so what it does, it allows us to adapt to what we call super shocks. If it's just the ordinary course of business, then keep the budget going. If there's a massive shock, I mean, at some point in time, there has been the risk of us being nationalized in the hospital. So that's a shock. So it just gives us the ability to not be locked in and to have an honest discussion with management about what they need to do to adapt to the new reality.
Thank you, Karen. I don't know, I have some more questions, but I think perhaps we should allow the audience now to participate in the conversation and perhaps put their own questions forward. And this is for the audience, both in the room and those online. How can we track the questions that may be submitted online? Or is there anybody, while we're doing that, in the room, any questions for our panelists? Okay. So while we're working on that, I still have some more questions. Karen, let me start with you this time. What KPIs do you think are particularly useful? Which KPIs for tracking progress that are particularly useful to follow in these volatile times? So when you're reviewing the budget every 90 days and so on, which metrics would you be focusing on? Or would you recommend for?
I think the budget is just one of the metrics. I think the human resources and talent side is a really important KPI because we have to make sure that our team is happy. We have to make sure that our turnover is managed well, that our identified talent is going to continue to be with us, and that we're developing it. So I think from the board standpoint, the human resources part is very important and is a major part of the KPI of senior management. If we see turnover, especially in the top talent that's been identified, that's a warning sign to us that the culture in that organization is not what it should be. And in Mexico, keeping your talent is a challenge. It's hard to find. You develop it, you educate it, you train, you grow them, you mentor them, and if you have turnover, then there's a problem. So I think for me, the budget is numbers. And it's the usual KPIs, ROI, the usual. But the other side of is the people. If you don't have the people, you're not going to get anything done. You're not going to be successful, and you're not going to be able to implement any plan. So I really focus on the soft side of the human side of the business as well.
Yeah, thank you, that's very helpful. Tokunbo, coming to you, what would your recommendation be to board directors in terms of assessing the trade-offs that they have to make between the short-term financial stability of the companies that they are running and long-term investments, perhaps in things like innovation and growth in volatile times? What would your advice be there?
Yes, I mentioned earlier about how you think about lengthening your runway, lengthening the time that you have with the reserves, such that you minimize the time to have to go out to raise funding. And so any initiatives that are going to be a huge drain, such that before you can begin to see the benefits of those initiatives within that volatile period, you run out of cash. You might want to deprioritize that and prioritize on those quick wins that will enable you to preserve cash, but also make you more attractive. And if you're in manufacturing, for example, maybe it's the size of your product, the size of the packs that you sell, because maybe before people were willing to spend 100 naira on your product, but now they're only willing to spend 50. Maybe you need to right size the product to make sure that you can still get the volumes out the door. And like I mentioned earlier, a key thing is just take a step back to make sure that everybody is on the same page with respect to the vision of the company, with respect to innovation, with respect to driving for new products, with respect to cost efficiency. What are those initiatives that you can do, quick wins, that can drive your costs down? And if you do have deep enough pockets for digital transformation, then start in the most important area of the business and transform there. If it's around the biggest cost actually to many businesses is their energy cost. If it's around what you can do on the energy side, whether that's even within the time that the uptime that you have in the factory, or the switching from the energy or the backup energy that you have, make those investments that can give you your biggest bang for buck while helping you to make you more attractive, bring in the new products or new market possibilities, drive costs down, and help you survive for longer.
Toby, coming to you, you were saying something about it being important for those of you in the operations side, perhaps to create some more visibility around what you do. But how do you manage that without also crossing over to becoming too visible, or are there any risks associated with that? Maybe that's the question I should ask.
Thank you. So I think in terms of visibility, yes, it's important to walk the fine line between sharing too much information and just sharing enough of what is required. The way I would look at it is this. In terms of operations, for example, I'm a firm believer, and I stand to be corrected, I'm a firm believer that aside from force majeure, every other risk manifesting could have been picked up much earlier. It's either the signs were ignored or the signs were missed. That's my belief and how I approach work. And therefore I do think that if I give a practical example, let's say we need to produce a certain product by December. Producing it by December means that, and you're importing the raw materials, say from China, means that it should sail from China maybe by the first week of October. The material sailing from China first week of October means that you should have issued a letter of credit to the supplier maybe by the 15th of September. The moment you have not issued that letter of credit by the 15th of September, technically, a red line has been crossed. What tends to happen is we try to start managing, which is we start having conversations, oh, the banks are delaying LCs and the rest of it, as opposed to a specific conversation of, I need this LC by the 5th, I needed this LC by the 15th, it's not available. If I don't have it by the 28th, we will no longer be able to produce by December, which is fine. And it could be that we would not have it, but then what it does is it gives, for example, the sales team at least 2 months to plan for an alternative, as opposed to we're only realizing a week or a few weeks before, and suddenly everyone is trying to make sense of it. So that's what I mean by visibility, which is the visibility there is the red line has been crossed, we needed this by X day, it wasn't available, what's the next step and how do we find alternatives?
Thank you. I don't know, do we have any questions online or anybody in the room?
Hamda, this is Omobola Johnson. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Oh, mobilize. Okay. I can't.
Yes, I wanted to, maybe not a question, but just to make a comment around something that both Tokumbo and I think Karen have referenced. And that is around talent. I think that, while we talk about FX volatility and interest rates and all of that, the biggest volatility that we have in Nigeria today is around talent, particularly the migration of professional talent. And I think that is the biggest leading indicator for the performance of any organization because, as Karen said, numbers we talk about past. And when you're looking at the future and seeing, how will this business be successful, or can it be successful in the future, I think it's really around talent. So I would just encourage, for those of us that sit on boards, you should ask your management team to show you the leadership succession bench. Look at how deep it is, who's ready now, who's ready later, how do they replace people when they leave, because they will leave. Because I think that is really one of the biggest sources of volatility that we're seeing in Nigeria today, and we should really pay attention to that. And thanks for Tokumbo and Karen for raising that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mobola. Very valid point. This bench strength, the talent, how are we keeping our talent? And we all know about the Jackpot syndrome, and it's across the board, really, young and old. So new hires and more experienced people. Any other comment from the audience or question? One?
I better read out the question.
Okay. Thank you.
To Toby.
Can I go on with my contribution?
What are the contingencies that must be imagined and addressed, and how easy are they to counter? I don't know if you heard me when I began the question. Okay.
Okay. I think where I would start with is it's probably on the last point, which is around talent, because I think a fair share of what happens in operations, especially in this part of the world, is our teams focused mostly on transactional activities as opposed to taking key decisions. And what do I mean by that? Let me just use an example. You would see, for example, a Danfo driver. A Danfo driver understands his boss very well. He doesn't need to see anything on the dashboard to know when he's running out of fuel. If there is something wrong, he knows what lever to pull. He's able to master everything. And in a way, that's a skill because he understands it. But then if you juxtapose that versus an Airbus A380 pilot, where you're just flicking the switches, you know exactly what to do, and half of the time you are sort of relaxed because it's on autopilot. I think we first of all need to move our operations teams from being downfall drivers, which is spending a lot of time on the transactional things, populating reports. They probably don't have time to analyze those reports because they're always on a deadline, and move them into sort of what I call it business partners, where they're taking decisions. Some of these things are coming through a lot quicker. They are able to spend a bit more time to really frame an outlook, and then begin to either edit that outlook or execute. I think that is really important, because any other strategy you have for operations, whether it's on resilience or the rest of it, if your team on the front line is not engaged in a manner where they're spending more time on their intellectual ability as opposed to just the repetitive action, whatever strategy you have in place most likely may not come to fruition. So for me, I think that is the first step. Obviously, to the question, there could be a variety of ways you can tackle some of the unpredictability. I spoke about scenario planning earlier, which is essentially ensuring that you're sort of scanning the environment, trying to understand what are the possible things that could go wrong, and then stress test your operations to be sure you're able to react. But I think the foundation of that is really on what is your operational team spending their time on. That would really reflect on the kind of successes you would attain.
Thank you, Toby. I think that was a comprehensive answer to the question. Any more questions from the chat? Okay, well, I have one here that I'm going to direct to Karen. That are there, from your experience, Karen, in the different industries that you're involved in, of any risk management strategies that you would suggest that a board needs to implement in order to mitigate the impacts of economic volatility? I'm talking risk management specifically.
Well, I think that the what if scenario is the best. I mean, none of us dreamed we would have a pandemic. We were all reacting seat of our pants because we had no previous way of knowing where we were going and what was happening. And in the manufacturing plants, we had the what ifs of what happens when our workers who are in their 50s and diabetic get COVID in a country with no medical care. So the what if in the manufacturing plant was, who's going to replace them? Can we keep the plant going? What lines do we have to shut down? So we did a whole scenario of, once we realized what was happening with COVID and its impact on our workforce, because we had an older workforce and our most skilled people were the ones who were the most vulnerable on the factory floor. So we had to do a what if scenario of, if we lose this group, what are we going to do? And that had all sorts of permutations. In the banking, what we had was the what if on our credit portfolios. What if, obviously the impact on the companies that we were lending to was great. And we went through different what if scenarios. Review your portfolio. Who's going to be doing the workouts? How are you going to do a restructuring? How are you going to analyze whether they're going to survive or not? So each of us in each industry had different scenario planning. And I think that probably because we come from emerging markets and countries that have had extreme volatility and all sorts of unpleasant surprises, in my case for the last 30 years, we did better in a sense than the Americans did. Or they're not used to this kind of stuff. And I would talk to my counterparts and they'd go, well, so what are you doing? I go, well, you go through your scenarios and you're pretty good at doing worst case analysis and then coming up with plan A, B, C, and D. So it's a hidden advantage to work in an environment like Mexico and Nigeria.
If I could just add on to that, because I think it's great to do scenario planning. What I find in many companies, though, is that they don't take the time to do that. But if we look at risk management from an opportunity perspective, and you're looking at each area of your business, what I've found where risk has shown up most is when there's concentration. Whether that's concentration in one particular product, reliance on one particular product, whether that's concentration in the bottlenecks that can occur within your operating system, whether that's even concentration in a monotype in your team, a homogeneous team where you're not bringing different perspectives to not just think about risk, but also to think about the opportunities that can arise from that diversity of perspectives. Another key area that I tend to talk about when I talk about risk is actually, do you have your governance in place? Do you have the right governance structure in place? Are you able to make effective decisions because you've been able to get the right data to make that and have those diverse perspectives in the room? And those diverse perspectives, again, that can drive innovation. So on the one hand, yes, it's great to do scenario planning, it's great to do a risk assessment, but think about those areas where you have concentration in your company as a first step.
Contribution to Kumbo. We have, two members of the audience who wanted to speak. Sorry to have kept you waiting. So can we have first Ngozi Edozian and then Afalake Lawal? I think those were the two hands that were up. Ngozi, please.
Good morning, Karen, Tokumbo. Thank you very much, and to all who've made comments. I think there's violent agreement in a lot of what has been said. But I just wanted to make a comment that I think there are times when we have to begin to think about the extraordinary as the ordinary. And I really think that we are now living in unprecedented times where many of these things that we thought unthinkable are the thinkable, and that is the time that we're living in. And I believe it was one of the speakers said that, we need to stop treating these things as extraordinary and recognize that we are actually in a new business order, right? So whether that you talk about currency issues, whether you talk about conflict, and I would add that we are actually entering a new geopolitical order, and what was there before in the next 5, 10, even in the immediate short term. And we haven't really spoken very much about sustainability and the tenets of sustainability and ESG. We are living in a completely new order in terms of climate change, as we know, and that has significant impact on cost structures. It has significant impact on even the products and services that we're going to be designing for the future, social inequality and issues, and governance. So Tokumbo ended her last comment by talking about governance. And I'd like to think that if we as directors recognize some of the key factors of what building a sustainable organization is and saying, what is your true north, what's your purpose, and taking a lens on our risk registers from things that come from ESG, and also looking at some of those solutions in what we talk about in terms of the governance. Are we actually measuring some of these potential disasters and putting in place the structures to mitigate? Are we thinking about the stakeholders? I think we may be better off. And I just want to say that I think we shouldn't look at where we are today as anything extraordinary, but this is the reality, I think, for some time to come. Let's look at even what happened in Libya, that's a climate issue. There's so much going on, even in our own environment. So I'd like to encourage us to think about the extraordinary as the ordinary and prepare for that, while keeping in mind how do we actually examine things that may come out of left field, because I think some of us are not even prepared for today's reality. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. And I mean, what I hear is this is the new normal, so we should deal with it and just learn to live with it and look ahead to the other things that are coming. Is Afolake Lawal still? I don't see the hand up anymore. Afolake Lawal.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm sorry, it took some time to get to you.
No, it's fine. Am I audible? Okay, so it's not so much of a question, it's just a contribution. And we've spoken about processes. That was what I really wanted to talk about. Just like, I think it was the second speaker that talked, I think it was Karen that talked about having served in different sectors. I've also served in different sectors of the economy on the boards of companies. But what I find out that is unique to all companies, all boards, is the structure and processes. And in my practice of corporate governance, I found out that is the basis of any board that is going to be functional. We talk about KPIs of C-suites and all that, but we also need to pay attention to boards. We need to pay attention to the directors. And when we talk about evaluation of directors, this is something that a lot of companies have to take seriously. The skill gap amongst directors is not the same. So, I mean, what I would want to recommend in my practice, in my journey on serving on the boards of companies, is that there are some skills that a lot of directors need to skill up. Because that is where strategy, when we talk about strategy, when we talk about culture, which are all things that have resonated with all of us today, it flows from the board. When we talk about the vision and the mission, which transmitted to the C-suites, down to the managerial level, to all members of the company, it flows from the board. And so the ability for the director to be able to ask questions that is going to reveal the needs of the company is very germane. And a director that is not properly equipped might not be able to ask those questions. So we find out that instead of concentrating on those things that are germane, we find in some companies we are paying attention to things that that really should not be. There is a lot that needs to be taught by there's a lot that needs to be learned by directors. Some directors are on the boards of companies, and the article of the company say different things from the vision of the company. So many things need to be put in place. I really would want to commend WCD for this initiative, but I think it needs to go well beyond this initiative. There are some directors that need such courses as finance for non-finance directors. What are we doing about this? So in essence, in conclusion, what I'm saying is that while I want to thank WCD for this opportunity, in going back to our various boards, we need to take the essence of board evaluation, very important. Be able to identify what comes out of this evaluation and be able to treat it so that companies can be better for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the contribution. When you started, I didn't hear you clearly, but you came across clearly subsequently. Before I go back to the panel and allow each person to give their closing remarks, I just wanted to ask Toby one question on this supply chain, to say, what role do you think that the board as a whole has in implementing and adapting supply chain management and all of that, new techniques, say, in volatile times, maybe at all times, but particularly now?
Okay, so I think the first thing is for the board to demand visibility from the supply chain or the operations department. I think it's important to open up what exactly is going on in the value chain, because with that level of transparency brings also some angle of collective solutions. So for example, if the supply chain is working on a project on, say, backward integration, and let's say you want to localize tomato paste. If you work on it, get your suppliers, do your trials and all of that, and get to a point where you say, yes, you have a solution. But then the marketing team says, sorry, the taste profile is wrong. Our consumers would not enjoy it. Then that's where you start getting a bit of that dysfunctional way of working. And that's why I think transparency is important. I think what is also important is to, like I said earlier, I think when I talked about reimagining the value chain, I think for me the angle is the task for supply chain typically is what can you save, how do you get a bit more savings here and there. But in terms of the new norm, you can't save your way out of it. And it doesn't imply that savings is not, important. It is. But then a lot has to change. So, for example, you need to even question where you site your factories. So if for example, you have a factory sited in Lagos State, but then Ogun State is offering you something a lot more with gas, with some other things, it's worth having that conversation. And I think the era we're in now is the era where everything is absolutely on the table in terms of having the right conversations. So I think for the board, I think it's to put a lot more pressure on the supply chain beyond the incremental savings or initiatives to say, look, how exactly are we going to change our approach? And if we look at it, especially for the multinationals, you see a lot more companies doing that, especially of Indian or Lebanese origin. The way they operate, citing some factories in the north, in other parts of the country, diversifying their portfolio. And so it's really about how do we then start making ourselves a lot more flexible in our approach and really having those tough conversations. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think before we started, we were talking about some of these new multinationals of Lebanese and Indian origin and their approach being different and so far seeming to be very, very successful. So clearly there's a lot to be learned from that. Was a question flashing up just?
Okay. I personally don't have. I'm very strapped right now. But let me see if I can identify a couple of people who might have interest, and then I'll get back to you.
Somebody is not muted. Please, can you mute yourself?
All right. All right. We'll do so. All right.
Can we mute from here? Can we mute them from here? So we'd like to give our panelists a few minutes to make their closing remarks, and we'll give you 3 minutes to closing remarks.
I didn't hear anything, but I wonder if that was me you called upon? Hello?
Oh, Karen can't hear us.
Should I go ahead?
Okay.
Should I go ahead?
Oh, sorry, Tokumbo, you were saying something? No. You'd like to go?
Yes.
Okay, Tokumbo, please go ahead.
Whether you called on me.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. So I've mentioned quite a few things today from a funding perspective, a financing perspective. When we are looking at companies, we're looking at companies that have good people at the helm. Everyone's clear on the vision of the company and where they're going. Well, we and attractive businesses that can adopt all the strategies, the kinds of strategies we've been talking about. Like I mentioned earlier, how can you diversify on revenue, diversify on your teams? How can you be cost efficient? On the cost efficiency, again, when as a funder, some of the key contributions that we bring are beyond money. It's the access to talent, it's the access to networks, it's the frameworks around how you go for longer and how you get the biggest bang for buck. For us in particular, we're intentional around governance factors, social factors, particularly around gender diversity. We didn't touch upon that as a huge risk mitigant, but I spoke about that in terms of ensuring that you have diversity and you're not concentrated. And another area we're big on is how are you using technologies, and that's digital transformation as well as green technologies. We talked about that earlier. Oftentimes people talk about ESG factors, and what we found is actually people don't even understand what that means. So we try to break it down and say this is the opportunity for you to be a more resilient company. Green for cost efficiency, diversity for greater governance, better innovation, risk mitigation from diverse perspectives, and how you think about your people. And your people goes from your ownership, your board, the people that are producing, the consumers that you're producing products for. So for us, we look at the wholeness of these to come together to think about resilience, because as we've mentioned, scenario planning only gets you so far, and scenario planning really talks about what you know and doesn't cover what you don't know. So you need to be building resilient companies that can enable you to adapt and be flexible when this volatility comes in. So focus on those factors to get you your biggest bang for your buck and to reach your full potential, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Tokunbo. Karen, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I said your turn now to give your closing remarks.
Well, I have to say that I agree with much, with everything that Tokunbo and Toby have said. And I firmly believe that diversity, in all senses of the word, is very, very important for a company's survival. We, in Mexico, tend to have boards that are friends, people that they play golf with. It's what we call a club of Tobies. It's an uphill battle. I have seen as a banker dealing with the large Mexican companies, which are all family owned, that if the management and the board all come from the same school, all fly around to Vail together, play at the same golf course, that's probably not a good credit risk. And I also probably won't be on their board. So I think that in terms of the value added that we bring to a board, it's the ability to question, the ability to think out of the box, to identify risks and opportunities that people who have groupthink doesn't even occur to them. And I think that's a very important component of what a board should be bringing to the table. Questioning. I'm constantly sending information to my fellow board members and to management when I see something that I think is relevant. Obviously, we're going through massive technological change, massive climate change. I mean, the bank in the Dominican Republic, we went to the cloud because we had a hurricane that hit both both of our backup centers. Luckily, we had a backup center in Puerto Rico, but it was the same hurricane. It hit Puerto Rico too. That was in the olden days. So climate change is a big deal. And as board members, we need to keep pushing the envelope. That's our responsibility. That's strategy. That's all I have.
Karen, And then
Yes.
Toby, your last contribution.
Okay. So I think I'll start by saying that I think the sum total of a lot of what we've discussed today is around resilience. But then I think the way I would look at it also is, as we build our talent profile with the focus on resilient people, we need to ensure that we have a clear and collective understanding of what resilience truly means. Resilience is not firefighting, it's not damage control, it's not keeping your head above water alone. It's also about successfully navigating the challenges, but then also being able to grow and be able to frame the forward outlook, which is a bit more long term. And it's important even in how we source for talent, that we review some of our processes to really test for these things. Because in the world today, people can chat GPT their way through an interview. They can give you all the answers you're looking for. But I think that's something also from an HR perspective, working with hiring managers on how to really test. And the last thing I would say on talent, because I think it's really the bedrock of this, is let's endeavor to future-proof our operations. I spoke about it earlier in terms of transactional activities. When we talk about digital transformation, at times it sounds huge, but these are basic initiatives. I guarantee you that some of the initiatives on digital transformation, aggregating data, secondary school kids can actually do that for you. So it's not something so magnificent in terms of what it looks like, but it's just about basic solutions. I think we need to be realistic for Nigeria that we will lose talent. I have the view that retaining talent today is quite tough, because if I use supply chain as an example, when you have a logistics professional, you're not just trying to retain talent versus other companies in the country. You're competing with Amazon, you're competing with Walmart and everyone else. So I think the important thing is to really future-proof your operations such that onboarding of new talent as they come in becomes a bit more straightforward, and there isn't a lot more around processes sitting in someone's head. It's actually either automated or it's clearly outlined. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our distinguished panelists. Just a few words to wrap up, and I'd like to seize the opportunity of having the microphone to do that. Many of the things that we've said here, they are so true and so important. Somebody said that we shouldn't think of this volatility of something that's just extraordinary that's happened. This is real life. This is what is going to be going ahead. And when they talk about VUCA, every element of that VUCA, I think, is with us to stay. And we have to accept that. And I think it's important for us as directors to know that if we're going to succeed, in addition to everything that our panelists have said, diversity, resilience, and all of that, we also have to dare to be different and do something different from the rest of the pack. Because one of the questions I was asking Toby was that, why is it that you think that this neutrality, FX neutrality hasn't happened yet? And I believe it's because once the sort of shock of the problem was over, the whole herd was so quick to go back to what they were doing before, and nobody was going to take the risk of saying, I'm going to stick with this path, with this path. I may not for a couple of years be as successful in terms of the financial metrics as some of my competition, but down the road, this is going to work for me. And I think it's true in every industry, whether you're in manufacturing or in services, certainly in banking, it's very true. You're doing what the next person is doing so that you don't look different to your board. And I think it is the responsibility of boards to empower the executive to say, we understand what we are doing and we will stand by you. If we don't do that, we're going to get the same results we've always got. And I thought I should just mention that, having the microphone. So thank you very much to our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much, ladies who have stayed up to be with us. Thank you, Toby, for coming in. And we hope we'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Adding my thanks to everyone. We have a message from our global CEO, Jennifer Reynolds. And so I'm going to ask Jennifer to just go ahead and speak. And then my co-chair, Mrs. Lamekran, will end the meeting. But I do want to just take a minute to apologize for all the technical difficulties we've had. And that caused a little bit of a late start, but I apologize to everyone. It's generally not something that happens, and the next meeting, I hope, will sort all of this out. Jennifer, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to have a few moments at your meeting today. A great discussion, by the way. Really enjoyed it. And I just wanted to give a very quick update on some things that are happening globally with WCD so that everyone's aware of it. Maybe just to remind people, so today as we stand, we're 2,500 women corporate directors throughout the world. About 45% of those are in the US, and the rest are all over 5 continents. So very active chapters, whether that's in LATAM, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. And we're all back in person again, which is so wonderful. So we're seeing lots of activity back in person. So, and maybe I'll just check in and make sure, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. I just want to make sure before I continue. Thank you. So I just wanted to mention 3 things to keep everyone up to speed on what's happening. Number 1, we are reintroducing our regional institute. So we have one coming up in Europe in Frankfurt on October 26th and 27th. We're really trying to offer opportunities for different regions to get together, to network, to share information. So that one's the first one. We have one in Buenos Aires in Argentina in April as well. And we are looking to plan one for Africa as well. So more to come on that to get our African chapters together and attract some of our other global chapters outside of Africa as well who would have interest in coming to join a regional institute there. We still have our Global Institute in New York City. The next one will be in the fall of 2024. We had 2 this year, actually, one in September and one in June, which were attended by about 250 people for each one. And very global representation there. One thing I should mention as well is we do recognize companies from around the world at our Visionary Awards at the Global Institute. So we're taking nominations right now. Would encourage you to take a look at some of the companies in your region. Are there any that you would like to nominate for our awards? Last year we had our most global group of winners. We want to continue with that and make sure that we're looking around the world to great companies to profile at our Visionary Awards. 2 other things I'll mention. We do have virtual programming. I encourage you to take advantage of that. A lot of that would happen sort of end of day your time, and we're also experimenting with different time zones with some programming. One series in particular I'll mention is we do have what we call peer exchanges, and so that's a deep dive for different committees. The audit committee peer exchange, nominating and governance peer exchange. We've got one for private companies and family-owned businesses, and then a human capital one. So these are an hour and a half quarterly, and it really is, it's a panel discussion, but then we go into breakout rooms and have a deep dive and a very interactive discussion. So if you haven't experienced one of those, encourage you to check it out and see, experience that sort of more interactive type of a virtual environment. So the other final thing I'll mention for everyone is we are really working to make sure our board opportunities that we send out weekly on Fridays. If you're not receiving that, do let me know. I want to make sure everyone's getting them. But want to make sure that there's global opportunities there. We have a lot of board members who are looking for opportunities outside of their own country, and so we're trying to make sure that we're offering a really broad spectrum of roles. So please encourage your companies to post as well. It's free. They can post on our newsletter that goes out once a week and put those opportunities out to our membership so we can help our members get on more boards, their second board, their third board, or transition as they're going through their board career. I really think that that's an important value proposition that we want to offer and augment for our members. So those were some of the highlights. I know everyone's in the room together and wants to network and socialize, so I didn't want to take too much time. Only other thing I would mention is we are working hard in the background. We've done a rebrand. Hopefully you've noticed our website. We have a new website as well, and we're working on a new membership system, so hopefully you're experienced with our Technology will be better. A bit of a new digital rehaul too, which we're working on. So more to come on that. So I will leave it at that. Again, thank you so much for having me today, and I hope one of these days to be there in person with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in and sharing that. And first, I would like to say thank you very much to our host, to Cadbury. We are completely appreciative. Yimika, it wasn't too much of a push to get her to say she would host us. And I think what was more important was that she then said her entire team was behind her, and we're very excited to be able to host us today. So we have to say thank you very much. We are truly appreciative, and we're actually extremely appreciative that you took the fellow ladies out of their comfort zone. All the meetings have been in VI, so it was good to get everybody out of VI and to get us into the real sector. I think that was key in terms of what we've done. So again, another round of applause for Cadbury and for Yimika. We really truly appreciate that. I also then want to say thank you very much to our moderator. She said thank you to the panelists, but I have to say thank you to our moderator, Hamda. Again, it was without hesitation when she was asked, and we were thinking who best could pull all this together. So thank you very much. We truly appreciate this. And I think it always makes it a bit more exciting for us when we have members of WCD, the ones who are engaging or the ones who are taking part in the event. So thank you very much. You have said thank you to the panelists, so don't think I'm not saying thank you, Toby. We truly appreciated what everybody did. Now, I guess, after the thanks, a question we always ask ourselves is what's the value we're providing to you as members of WCD? And it's a question we ask all the time. And part of what we find out is that, yes, there's much more we can do, but I think there's also, Jennifer talked about it, that there's also a lot that's provided on the global platform. And we want to encourage members to please participate in some of those events that happen and also use the resources. I mean, about 2 weeks ago, there are some peer exchange communities, and one of them is the audit committee. And I know a number of us must sit on the audit committee, or we chair the audit committee. 2 of us joined from Nigeria, Oyiko, Adewale, and am I echoing? That's the okay, maybe I'll just try and hold it a bit.
You see, there was a bit of an echo, but we could hear you.
You can hear me. Thank you very much, MEC. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. So, I think 2 weeks ago there was another peer exchange, and there are a number of peer exchanges. There's one on governance and the compensation committee. Oyinkan Adewale and myself joined, and I then had a conversation with Oyinkan after, just to feel the pulse, and we both concluded that it was actually valuable, good use of our time. And the discussion was then focused around AI and the impact of AI both on financial reporting and on the audit. And both of us had left with a set of questions that we thought we were going to ask on our board, because it's one thing to talk about AI's technology, it's another thing to bring it home in terms of our responsibilities as the board. For me, it was even a wake-up call in terms of that the media, just the corporate affairs, could get all of us in trouble by misusing AI on the company. So I think that the more we can participate in this, we will truly get value out of the membership that we do. The other thing is, I'm so happy that Benedicta is here today, because both of us attended the Global Institute in New York. And I don't know, I'll give you maybe a minute or two. But again, it was I always find it valuable. I mean, when we were trying to set this up, the first thing Karen said is, oh, I have a good friend here, Benedicta. And just the ability to network, to meet other ladies. And I think for all of us, we do want that global platform. So WCD provides a global platform. There are other organizations that may be local, but this truly provides a global platform. And Jennifer also talked about, directorships. We want to be on boards. It's a big global. So this gives us a platform. So I would say, yes, there's, we want to do more locally. KPMG has got a full-time person who we're so happy with at the moment, Tumike, and we should say thank you to her because she's done wonderful. If you were getting all those emails and the updates, it was all because of her. And, so we will do more. We'll push more information. We'll contribute more. But please plug into the global platform. I think that's what this is about. If not, we'll just be another local organization, but it's being part of the global platform that is important. And Timos also attended the Global Institute. She was a moderator, she was a speaker on a panel when she attended. But I don't know if I should just give you 1 or 2 minutes, because I think it's useful to just hear about your experience as we talk about, sort of the global platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair and Co-Chair. My fellow members, hi. Well, when I thought I would go, I called around to BC to find out if there were any others, from the platform that were interested in going. And after 1 week, 2 weeks, there was nobody else. And somehow, I think she attended out of sympathy or just... But of course, it's a long way to go, so I know she had other things planned. But honestly, it was not a waste of my time. And it gave a different complexion to what I thought WCD could be. I've been on other associations that have international chapters, but none that was as detailed in terms of the activities they offered. There were focus groups, and all of those sessions were incisive. And if you had anything to offer, they certainly were willing to give you a platform to do so. And I think, having attended one, I'd like to encourage members here to try to look at the calendar and fit something into their general program, because I know all of you travel abroad some point. Whether it's Africa, whether it's in Venezuela or wherever. It's an enriching experience, and you get to meet all these big CEOs in other countries. And of course, proudly, there was a lady from the World Bank who was, of course, Nigerian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was also going to, just to add, and so that we can understand this global platform. Dr. Bello Osage has also attended, but the twist I wanted to add to hers was that on attending, because she was going to Boston after, she met the members of the Boston chapter, and she was immediately invited to the meeting in Boston. And when we talk supply chain today, that was because that was one of the things that was focused on when she attended the chapter in Boston. So the other thing WCD does is anywhere you are in the world, when you're a member, you can join chapter meetings when you're in that place. So again, that's another level of detailed interaction. It also means that there may be topics that are relevant that are being brought home at that time. So if there's anything, any way you think we can add more value, if there's anything you want us to do, please, reach out. We really, truly appreciate input, feedback, criticism. We're fine with that. Anything that would help us improve what we're doing, we're fine with that. So just thank you very much again. Our next meeting, if you can just put a placeholder, will be December 15th. And we think that, except there are other suggestions, but we want to try and focus on the role of the board in terms of this audit responsibility. We think there's so much going on, and that a focus on that, both as a board member, both as members of the audit committee. I chair some audit committees, so a focus on that, and a focus on the things that we should be asking, will be what we want to focus on. But if there's any other ideas on, what we think is more topical that we want us to focus on, please let us know. So December 15th, just, please put a placeholder. We'll send that out. And the last thing I would like to say about December 15th is that we would appreciate somebody to host us on December 15th. We truly would appreciate an organization that would host us. I'm now behaving like a preacher that always says in church, this is the last thing, and they have 4 other things. So this may be the very last thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was, please renew your membership dues. We had a long conversation with the global team explaining the economic situation, and we know that even $300 is not a lot to all the ladies that are members, but we thought we needed to put it in context of the economy, and we needed to put it in a way that's responsive. So the membership dues for Nigeria for this year is just $175. That's the, we got a discount, and that's the concession for this year only. But please, we want people to make sure they've signed up formally, and also make sure that they've paid the dues. Okay, somebody has her hand up. I don't know how I do this, so maybe I should answer that question. But please pay your dues, yes. How do we unmute her? Okay.
I think I unmuted.
Mr. Ibrahim, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much for arranging this.
Please hold on 1 minute. Hold on 1 minute. There's a bit of technology that, yeah.
You can go ahead.
Okay. The question that I wanted to ask is, if you are a director, probably in a small company that you own yourself, or you're an aspiring director, is it possible to join the WCD? Or you have to be a director somewhere in a corporate organization before you can join it?
Very much. I think I heard the question. The question is, what qualifies one to be able to join WCD? Now, the thing about WCD, and I truly believe that focus is important, because no organization can be everything to everybody. It is not possible, and the programs would then not be tailored appropriately to the members. So WCD in the US is focused on the top organizations, so there is a minimum turnover. What we did was that we translated, obviously with discussion with the global team, translated that to a relevant turnover in Nigeria, which we have not changed, which doesn't reflect the purchasing parity of where we are today. And that turnover today is 12 billion naira. So it's a company with a minimum turnover of 12 billion naira. But we also understand that, they are aspiring directors, aspiring organizations. So what we'll do is when we have events that are relevant, we will invite people to join those events. But membership is, it's based on a particular cutoff in terms of turnover, and it's really so that we can make sure that our activities are relevant for the members. So the activities are focused on the large corporates. That's what it is, and it's important we just keep it that way for now. I mean, the other thing WCD does, which we had thought about in Nigeria, which we will put some more thought to it. There's something called, but WCD hasn't also developed it as well as they thought. It's something called a board next, which is then looking at, and it's not focused on just anybody. It's focused on women who would be able to get on the boards of these large corporations. So that's what it is. So it won't be focused, we won't be, if we did do it, we're not competing with any existing program. It will be women who would qualify to get on the large boards, and it's called, it's sort of a board readiness. But again, when we talk to them, they truly hadn't rolled it out, and we then just sort of slowed down in Nigeria. But I think as we begin to look at next year, and as we hear from members, we can then define what are our priorities for next year in terms of WCD in Nigeria. I hope that answered the question. Yes, I think I am finally done. Amen.
Okay.
Have asked me if I was done. Please, our host and hostesses, they provided a spread for us, and we have to take that, whether we like it or not. Please, please, because it's with a lot of effort. Where's the mic?
Thank you so much.
Hello, please, for the food, you can snack here and you can also take home. It's 2 things, please. 2 things. 2 things.
And Boniface and unfortunately. Sorry, everybody. Just a second. Yes. Oh, thank you, Tony. I shall call you.
Tony, thank you so much. Yeah, I don't think we've been doing like you were all on the call. Thank you very much.